If anyone else gets to your kids first, it'll be very hard to undo it. First in wins. Hi folks, Barak Lurie again on the Barak Lurie Show. Thanks for tuning in. We've spoken quite a bit about the 4 steps necessary to help your kids become rock-solid conservatives, lovers of America and Western civilization. We talked about how you need to identify the issues and get ahead of it, then to explain it. Then we talked about laughing about it, and then finally dismissing the issues so that your child understands the issues clearly and simply in the most fun way possible. But I also said that it has to be done early in the lives of your children. If you want them to stay conservative and lovers of America and God, yes, you have to get to them as early as possible. I'm talking 3 or 4 or 5 years old, and start talking about these issues right away as part of your daily routine. There are so many learning, teachable moments, as it were, when you just go about your daily routine and talk to the kids about these very important issues. But I've said you've got to do it very early as you can. Why? Because of a concept I call first in wins. What's that? The first time that you hear about an idea, that's going to solidify in your brain. If you start talking to a kid about economic systems, and obviously talking to them in kid-friendly ways, and the first thing you talk about is communism and how wonderful it would be if everyone just shared all the goodies that they're all receiving, the kid will say, yeah, I really like that. And that's what will stick in his brain. And it'll be very hard to unwind that. So be very careful. There are teachers and administrators who would like to shape your kid's mind with concepts of socialism, about toxic masculinity, about global warming, about how government needs to be everywhere, how we need to be responsible for everyone on the planet, how we must open our borders because we have to be compassionate, or whatever it might be. Those ideas, if anyone else gets to your kids first, it'll be very hard to undo it. First in wins. It's easier to undo it when the kids are 3 or 4 or 5 because their brains are willing to shape a little bit. But after a certain point, it's going to be very, very hard. And once they get to college, if you haven't already infused certain principles within their brains, and then they go to college and the first time they're hearing about how America is a terrible country, how God isn't real, all those things about transgenderism, well, you're going to have a tough time unwinding that and explain to them why all their glorious professors, whom they really respect, and all their friends who were so cool and so high-minded and smoked pipes and were just awesome, you're going to have to convince them that all those guys were fools and that you, the parent, were right. Good luck. It's not going to work. You have to infuse them right from the get-go with these very important ideas and get in there first. You know, there's a great example of this, about the first in wins in a very bad way. There's a man, a musician, a famous one, named Roger Waters. Roger Waters was the former frontman for Pink Floyd, a very famous psychedelic band from the 70s and early 80s. And he has now become a very strong advocate against Israel, calling it an apartheid country, very pro-Arab, very pro-Palestinian. Why is he so animated about Israel? It turns out, if you look back in his history, he was backpacking in the Middle East, in Lebanon in particular, back when he was 17 years old. This would be the very early 60s. He ended up hiking and he needed a place to stay, and there was a nice little family that took him in and became very good hosts for him as he was their guest. They were so nice that the mother actually gave him her food. He didn't know it. He realized after he consumed all the food that it was actually the mother's food that he had taken. He felt bad about it. But they were so nice to him. And in the process, of course, they told him how Israel was their problem and they didn't really like Israel. And he quickly adopted the pro-Arab position on everything. First in, won. Roger Waters carried that mantra in his head, that belief in his head, this hatred of Israel. And it grew and grew and grew. He identified very strongly with the Arab side of the Arab-Israeli conflict. And there's no swaying him at this point. You could show him how great Israel is, how Israel is a fantastic democracy, how it has more variety and more diversity in that nation than any other country in the Middle East. In fact, maybe any other country in the entire world, and has more humanity and more rights. And you could talk to him about the history of Israel, how Jews were always there, indigenous to the land of Israel from time immemorial, but he won't care because first in won. They got to him without them even realizing it. And he imbibed it, and it's impossible now. Understand that that's the way it works in your kids' minds. Get to them first before the teachers, social media, or anyone else gets into their brains before you. That's your role as a parent. That's your responsibility. If you want kids to love America, to love Israel, to love God, to love Western civilization for that matter, the way that you do, get in there, be first, and be constant about it. Don't assume that all these great things will pass on to your kids through osmosis, because you're fighting a battle with a lot of other people and you don't even know what they're teaching your kids. I'm Barak Lurie. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you next week.